Have you ever found yourself staring at the clock, counting the seconds until you leave work? Or maybe you felt a sinking feeling on Sunday nights, dreading that upcoming work week? Well, welcome to the Nickolas Natali Show, because today we are talking and exploring one of the toughest decisions many of us face in our careers, knowing when it's the right time to quit your job. There's a lot of details that go into making this decision because it's potentially a big one. For the purpose of this episode, I'm talking to folks that are wearing the quote-unquote golden handcuffs. You got a job, it probably pays well enough, it's comfortable, it's cushy, you know it, it's kind of your lifestyle now, but you're not necessarily challenged or fulfilled by it, but it's so good, you got that steady check coming in. So why would I leave something good for perhaps the unknown? Or even, why would I quit something good when I have this far out pursuit or dream that I want to end up fulfilling on someday, but my handcuffs are so golden? So the first thing to consider when you're trying to decide whether to quit your job is the loss of passion or motivation. Essentially, if your workplace has become mundane, boring, not challenging, you don't find it interesting in any particular way, or the team itself, the environment, being there day in and day out doesn't inspire you to end up bettering yourself. And on that note, I would like to say that the reason that I am qualified to discuss this particular topic is because I've made this decision. I've made this tough decision. At the end of all of these different areas that we'll cover, I'll walk you through some of my story and how I came to that decision. So we've touched on it a bit. The loss of motivation, you're no longer passionate about this area. It's fizzled out, that excitement. Not to say that you necessarily need to be passionate about the work that you do. There is a idea that back in the day, people didn't really discuss their passions. It's a luxury to be able to say that I'm no longer passionate about this thing or motivated by this occupation, and I'm willing to look toward the next thing. There's a sense of privilege in that we should be grateful for. Think about way back when, 1920s, Depression. I'm not a history buff, but I imagine many of those workers were hitting some coal mines, and they didn't care whether they were passionate about mining coal. They were trying to put some food on the table. So with that perspective in mind, think about whether this is a loss of passion and motivation, so much so that you are willing to jump ship, or if it's, hey, I really should be keeping this job until I level up my skills so that I can move into a better opportunity. The next thing to consider is there's no room for growth. You've maxed out on the upward trajectory that you can make it inside of your career. We call this climbing the old corporate ladder. If there's not a clear path to growth and you enjoy this job, talk to the next person in line about what that might look like. You might find that there's nothing else, that there's nothing left for you. And if that's important for you, growth in your career, and you've already capped out, time to consider your options. And typically the lack of growth, I'm not even necessarily saying in terms of salary, like promotions or opportunities. I'm also talking about in terms of challenges, work challenges, areas where you can learn. You can be in the same position, but if you're constantly jumping into other areas that would require you to grow a more diverse set of skills or to learn really quote unquote lucrative or high value skills, then that seems like a place that's worth it. So it's not only monetary growth, it's personal and it's skill development growth too to be aware of. The next thing to consider is the old work-life balance. Now, I've talked to many a degree about balance, and for the entrepreneurs, you already know my beliefs around it. I think balance comes in waves. There's seasons where you're going to be working 12 to 16 hours a day, and then there's going to be seasons where you're honing back a little bit, getting those 8 hours a day, like your sleep schedule. Different times call for different levels of effort. However, if you're working in a job that requires you to overwork yourself consistently, typically without compensation to match that, there's long-term effects of stress physically. That's just straight up how it is. Doctors be asking you when you go in for an appointment, are you stressed? because of the impact that it has on you personally. So consider those things. That might be the reason you're considering your options, is because you have no work-life balance. Do you have a social life? Does your job not allow you to see your friends or your family or to enjoy some of the hobbies that you used to? These are things to consider before jumping ship, because you might have it nice, but you also might be overworking. And I do always think that having the conversation with the person that can help dictate your schedule, your working schedule, have those conversations, even if they are difficult, because of what's on the other side. You get a no and you got to still work the same crazy hours, or you get a yes. A lot of upside to that, but something to consider. Stress for a long period of time can have serious damaging effects. Of course, another facet to think about is value misalignment. And this is partial to my story as well. If your company no longer is serving the same values you believe in, I think that is a great reason to consider looking at other options. If the values of the company started out as X and now they're Y, and you don't believe in Y, then worthwhile to consider. And then, of course, there's better opportunities, higher pay, more challenge, more opportunity to learn. If those opportunities arise, or if you're able to find those opportunities, there's something to be said for loyalty. I do think that is somewhat of a lost art these days in the workplace. However, if there's a better opportunity and it is a good fit and it is value aligned, it does provide the lifestyle that you're looking for, definitely always worth considering those. Now, the other component is financial, and I'm going to talk about my story now and how many of these that I just listed play into that. So, as you may know, I had a very cushy job. I had as golden handcuffs as you can make them. They were shining. And over time, what was once a challenging job that provided me with fulfillment and opportunity ended up becoming a very easy job that was not challenging, nor did I find any fulfillment, and the work culture and the environment was horrendous, which caused me to ultimately leave. Now, it was difficult for me to, so part of me believes that God interjected because he knew how golden the handcuffs were to provide me a way out. My decision to leave came from an incident where we had an employee that worked there who went on paid leave because he punched an intern in the face, and every time his name came up, everybody said, "Where's an intern I can punch in the face? I want a year vacation." He finally came back. I never met this guy. First time meeting him, he unprovoked threatened me, and I ended up taking this to HR. HR said, "Hey, don't use profanity in your emails." And as you know, not a big profane guy. I was just writing what this man said to me. And then my manager called and said, "Why'd you go to HR? Shouldn't have done that." Despite physical violence being on the table at that moment that I did not take part in. And that was the moment. It was a very extreme and hostile thing, and there was a lot of other things leading up to it that are like, you should leave. You should leave. You have bigger goals. You have other things that you want to accomplish. It's time to move on. And I liked the steady paycheck, even though I was unfulfilled and unhappy and, truth be told, a little miserable at that job. That moment happened, and I was like, all right, I get it. I am out. The line has been crossed completely. I'm done. So I left. But before I left, here's what I did, and then here's also what I would advise. I saved up 6 months of an emergency fund because I was going into nothing. I did not have a job lined up. I did not have another opportunity lined up. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and I had no experience doing it. I had started businesses in the past, and my idea was I was going to help people get out of debt and sell a course and become a coach around the debt industry, and I helped people get out of debt. However, I had a really hard time charging people money because I would look at their finances and I'd be like, "You don't have any money. I can't charge you more money." I would feel so bad. And that became a really bad business model. And also, it's very hard, and this comes up in conversation amongst entrepreneurs a lot, called buying power. It's hard to sell to people without buying power. And that's a nice way to distinguish. You sell to people who already have money versus people who don't. Now, that makes them a more quote-unquote desperate buyer. If they really need your thing, they will do so, but I couldn't, with good conscience, tell them, throw this on the credit card and I will help you. That was my own thing. Besides the point. Save up an emergency fund, because regardless of if you get a new opportunity or not, let's say you do, let's say it's even worse case scenario, you still have that emergency fund that will provide you with the freedom to continue to make choices. The other thing to consider, if you're in a position that is good and you aren't necessarily unhappy with it, you just want to move on to the next thing, and maybe it's a side hustle, a good rule of thumb that people say is to build your side hustle up until it can replace your current salary. Or build your side hustle up enough to where if you were to put in 40 hours a week, as opposed to maybe the 10 that you currently are in your off hours, would you be able to quickly get it up to the salary that you currently have? I think that's fair. Other things to consider is timing your exit appropriately. If you have an end of the year bonus coming up, or if you're vested in your employer's retirement in 3 more months, grinding it out for 3 more months so you get 60 grand or 40 grand or 10 grand or whatever the case may be that they're going to match you, that may be worth it to you as well. Now, I do want to talk about that there is a mindset around this decision that will dictate your success after you quit. So let's say you quit and you go into entrepreneurship and you're growing that side hustle, or you quit and you got nothing lined up. Something that happened to me is when I quit, I was determined whatever I did next that I was going to make it work. And I also had the acute awareness that everyone that I've met that made that leap didn't starve. There's so many steps in between most people from going from having a job to all the way to homelessness. And now this is somewhat of a hot take, and I completely understand that. But if you quit your job, you have 6 months saved up, you get to the end of that 6 months and you move back in with family and you get back on your feet and then you double your income the next year, that's fine. I don't see an issue for ambitious people that are willing to make big sacrifices and make a quote-unquote step back if they have the mindset that they know they're going to propel forward. I was broke. I was really, really, really broke after I quit my job and I burned through my emergency fund. And I lived off of nothing. My whole mantra around living in the burb too, when I would go to bed and eat, sleep, a lot of that was repeated just being inside instead then. It was fighting to pay for rent, fighting to pay for utilities, being aware of my budget and what I could afford to eat and how to make food last. That's all part of the game. I'm not saying it has to be. Let's be clear there. I'm not saying you have to put yourself through anything like that. You can do this in a way where you quit your job and already have the next one lined up, where there's no days in between and you never have a stoppage in your cash flow. It depends on what you want. It depends on what you're chasing. And it depends on the goals that you have. Do you need those 6 months to write that short film that you've always dreamed of writing and create it and give yourself that time and space and save up the money to do it and then go find a job? This is why the decision to quit your job is more convoluted than it seems. And I totally understand if you're considering that right now and thinking about the economy and what job opportunities are out there. But I haven't experienced anything yet where betting on myself and saying, this is the goal that I have and this is the thing that I want, and I outline the steps that I need to take to get there. I haven't had it where the classic saying of it's either growing the business or it's growing me. It's either driving revenue or I am learning a new skill and growing my character. Hey, it'll build character. I believe in that. I think that's true. Now, there's a whole nother element to this as well. If you have kids, I don't. I think going the safer route of ensuring that you have the next job lined up if you're trying to jump to another job, or ensuring that your salary matches what you're currently making, or that decision that I mentioned earlier of if you were to quit and have an extra 40 hours, you could get it up there in X amount of months. I think that's all really worthwhile to consider, especially if you have a family. That's all I got for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. These solo episodes, love spending time with you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review on the platform that you're listening on. And if you're considering quitting your job and jumping to the next opportunity, I believe in you. I have faith in you. Do your due diligence. Make the plan and execute. See you in the next one.